to day 3 of International Law Career Week. Today might be the most important of all of our sessions because it's the one on how do you get an internship. And as you heard, especially on day 1 with the people who did public international law, every one of them started out with an internship and parlayed that internship into networks and ultimately to the jobs that they got and launched them on their career. This law school has had an amazing success story with internships. Ever since the Cox Center was founded 34 years ago, we have been using our money to send our students on internships all over the country and all over the world. And that has slowly built up a number of alums that have gotten jobs through those. And now we have perhaps the greatest number of alums that are working in the field of international law all over the world that are very interested in helping our students. They'll help you get internships, they'll help you network, they'll even help you get jobs. So it's all about starting out with an internship, and that's why today's panel is so important. There are several people I want to start out by introducing you to, and we're going to start out with our administrators. So how many of you have already met Julie Roby, who is the Associate Dean for Career Development? Raise your hand. All right, well, she also helps us with internships, so she's here to answer questions. Then we have Sarah Polly, who used to be the Associate Dean for various things, and now she is running the program and supervising the internship program, right? That's all under your portfolio.
Involved in the one experience and also externships and capstone. So I don't think you've met me yet, but you'll have plenty of time.
All right, and thank you for being here so that you can put a face to the name. And then finally, we have Patty Harble, who is, what is your position now?
Really new to the position. So I am just starting out working with Sarah. I work on internships, externships. I'll be meeting a lot of you, helping with externship placements, capstones, things like that. So we'll be chatting and come see me if you have any questions. But again, I'm very new to the position, so we'll be learning together. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, the three of you, for being here. And as questions arise that you can answer, please chime in. Now, I passed out to everybody a list of the students who did international law internships in their second year and in their, well, after the first year and after their second year. So they are now second and third years. And I asked all of them to come, but it's a really busy time of the year. The intrepid volunteers we have, though, are among my favorites, and you are going to get to know them really well. But let's start out with having each of you introduce yourself and where you interned.
Hi guys, my name is Kaylara. I am a 3L. My first summer I was in the New York office for the Human Rights Watch. And
that was it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's it. My second summer was at a firm.
Hi everyone, my name is Pilar. I also was at Human Rights Watch after my 1L year, but I was in the DC office.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Human Rights Watch is one of the permanent internship slots that we have. It was established by Bruce Klatsky, who's an alum who's been very generous to our Human Rights program. And every year we get to send 2 students to Human Rights Watch. We've been doing that for 21 years. There's a big cohort of people who've done that. Those people have gone off to all kinds of careers in public international law. It's a great stepping stone for those. Some of them go to the DC office, like Pilar. Some of them go to the New York office, like Kaylara. And part of that is online now by Zoom, right? And you also have a component where you can be physically present. So you're having those experiences. Okay, next.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and I have had the pleasure of doing 2 international law related jobs over the past 2 years. Not this last summer, but the year prior, I had the opportunity to work with the Cox International Law Center with Dean Scharf, specifically researching the 2025 ICC moot court question, and that was really fascinating getting to research a lot of international law issues. And then this past summer, I was in Hawaii on the Pearl Harbor base working with the Navy JAG.
Yeah. So how cool is that? You get to go to Hawaii and learn, international humanitarian law. And I do want to mention this. How many of you are planning on going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Friday night as part of the mid-year meeting? Good. I'm glad you're all going. I don't know if you know this, but Sophia is the lead singer in our faculty student rock band. So you'll be seeing her. She does a whole bunch of cool solos as well. So, all right.
Hi everyone, I'm Obama. I'm a 2L. I work with the Canada US Law Institute here in Ohio. So I work out of Cleveland and Kent. Yeah, that was fun.
And the Kent part was about the special aviation law project that you worked on. Is it about drones or? Yeah, it's very cool. Okay. Okay.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm a 2L, and then I spent this past summer at Human Rights Watch, technically the New York office, but I was mostly remote.
I'm Valeria Feliciano, and I did my internship this past summer in Interpol in Filipino.
The 2L, I spent my summer in Geneva, Switzerland, working for the International Federation of the Red Cross on a new treaty, which the UN General Assembly is going to start negotiating. Really excited.
Okay. So the Interpol position is also one of our permanent slots, and we have had 1 to 2 people work in Interpol. That's in Lyon, France, and also in Singapore. And then the Red Cross position was established by our alum, Chris Rossi, who's the chief of staff of the Red Cross. And Obed is one of several that have now had that internship, and that will continue to go on. We also have a permanent internship in London at the International Bar Association, working for Mark Ellis, the executive director, and he has a special center for human rights and war crimes that those projects are involved in. If you want to meet Mark Ellis, he is the keynote speaker Thursday night at the Botanical Garden for the big conference we're having. And I'm happy to introduce you either before or after he speaks so that you can say hello. All right, so that was the introductions. You have a question already or no? Okay, so maybe I'll ask you guys, tell us one thing that you thought was like the coolest thing you did during your internship to sort of get them excited about these kinds of experiences.
So while I was working at the New York office, I was engaged in their global department. Part of my research also, I was writing a health summarization, basically focusing on Brazil's use of glyphosate. That research was then put into UN policy or policy on pesticide management in developing countries, especially looking at the human health aspects of unregulated and widespread use. So I think that was pretty cool.
Sure.
Yeah, so I also wanted to say that I was mostly remote last summer. Maria mentioned that. That's just kind of how Human Rights Watch works nowadays. They almost do all of their internships remotely, and you can go into the office somewhat, but that's just a post-COVID policy. So I just want to mention that. I think the coolest thing that I did this summer was I wrote a dispatch. So it's basically like a news article of sorts about something that was passed in Congress over the summer, basically allowing super toxics. So it's something that we used to prevent under the Clean Air Act that is now allowed. So yay for the environment. But it was really cool because I got cited by a couple of news sources because the dispatch came out like the day after this bill passed, and it was waiting for a signature from the president. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and just along the lines of that project, years ago, I had a student who was assigned to Human Rights Watch, and the big project they were responsible for was Human Rights Watch had this huge new report, and they asked her to distill it into a 2-page briefing paper with Q&A for the press. And it took about a week or 2 for her to do that. It was really complicated. And she actually emailed me and said, Professor Scharf, I don't feel like I'm doing legal work. I'm being asked to do press guidance. And I wrote her back and I told her this story. And this is a really instructive story for all of you. That's part of the law. And it's a really important part. To take the legal stuff and make it accessible to the public is a really important part of human rights law. And when I was at the State Department as attorney advisor for UN Affairs, I used to write Security Council resolutions, but I also did the press guidance in the morning. And my boss, Bruce Raschkow, once came up to me and he said, Michael, where's the press guidance? I'm waiting for it. And I said, oh, well, we have a deadline in the Security Council resolution of 10 o'clock. I've got to get that done. It's like obviously more important than press guidance. He goes, no, it's not. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, you don't understand how America works. If you don't have the press guidance, we don't have the public on our side. And if the public's not on our side, then you don't have policy support for your precious Security Council resolution. So the press guidance comes first. And I learned a really important lesson there that as a lawyer, especially in international law, there are all kinds of jobs that don't sound like writing legal briefs, but they are really important legal jobs. And so I'm glad that you pointed that one out as an important experience that you had. Sophia.
Yes, I would say with the Navy in Hawaii, I had a plethora of experiences that I could highlight. But if I could just give you a little bit of a broad overview to kind of understand some of the wonderful experiences that I had and to give you a better idea of what that looked like. When you think of military law, it's sort of encompassing of a lot of types of law, but primarily when I was there, I rotated between three departments: command services, trial and legal assistance. And a part of these offices, whether it was writing memoranda, motions, investigations, I had a lot of neat experiences, whether it was going to NCIS or on a submarine or an aircraft carrier. There was a lot of fantastic experiences and would be happy to talk to you after this if you'd like to hear more about even what each individual department entailed.
My coolest thing was doing like a pilot's simulation. So basically, I got to experience what it feels like to, I guess, pilot a plane. I crashed into a building, but that was
And she was working on the new legal framework for drones, and this is going to be really important. They say within 10 years, instead of taking a taxi from the airport, you'll be getting an unmanned drone that will pick you up at the airport and take you to your destination. And the legal consequences of that are very complex, and that was her project, right? So, great.
I would say probably one of the most interesting things that I got to be a part of is kind of sitting in on kind of discussions about litigation that HRW was being like an amicus party to in South Africa. So kind of learning about civil procedure in South Africa was something I definitely did not expect from the summer, but I found it really interesting and fascinating.
For me, I think one of the first experiences comes to mind is one time that I got to, because in the front work was notice and inclusion, so basically I got like a meeting case that I have to work. I only have like 30 minutes. It was like, can you do this in 30 minutes? Like an over research about a person. I was like, I can try. And honestly, it was really like interesting researching about the person because it was about red notice and then seeing how I had to do it fast, send information, give my opinion if it's compliant or not for putting the red notice. And then one of the interns, one of my sent me news source that it was Polish, so I got to see how it got immediate results, which was really fascinating.
And an Interpol red notice is like an international arrest warrant. And so when you're working at the Interpol office, either in France or in Singapore, you're working on those and other international criminal law cases. And finally,
I didn't think any of my internship was going to be on my legal work, but like not work, I got to go to 4 different countries while I was in Europe. Pretty cool, but for work, I was working on. So I was saying there's this new treaty coming out. My whole job was interviewing government officials and National Red Cross leadership from 4 different parts of the world. So the case studies I built were from the Lebanese government, the government in Belize, the government in Madagascar, and the government in Fiji. And I got to conduct interviews with officials. Like as a first year law student, I was the one doing the interviews. The attorney on my team pretty much just let me run that, and it was kind of scary at first to do. But it was really great to be able to talk to people who like defining policy about like what they're thinking about and using that to inform sort of how we approach it.
So I think what you get a sense of is these are not the run-of-the-mill summer associate positions. There is something inherently exciting about these international law internships. And what that means is if in your first year you do one of those internships and then you're applying for a legal job here in the United States in your second year and you get an interview and they say, well, what did you do last summer? You're going to have an amazing story to tell, like the stories you've just heard. And that's going to help you get those jobs. Normally, people do these internships after their first year. They often will then get a job at a law firm in their second year. If they do well, they'll get an offer. So by the time you're third year, you'll know that you're employed at the end of law school, which is really good. And then people will usually start their careers in the private sector and then use those internship contacts to slide back into the public sector if that's what they're interested in. Some people will do these internships after their first year and after their second year, like Sophia did. And now you didn't mention this, but she got a job offer to be a JAG for the United States Navy, right? So, that works too. All right. All of the folks up here, just by coincidence, are people whose internships are part of our permanent slots. And I'm going to stop here and have one of you guys tell us how you go about applying for one of these permanent internships. Julie, do you want to do that? Okay.
Give you, oh,
And the microphone's only because we're recording this for posterity. So,
Okay, great. So first of all, I should just mention, you probably have heard me mention this before, but I'll just say something about terminology just so that it's clear what I'm describing. So we have internships that are not for course credit, and we have externships that are for course credit. And a number of these permanent slots are actually externships where you also can receive course credit. Some of them, that externship status is already prearranged. And then with others, you might have to self-arrange the status, but you would actually work with Sarah and with Patty to get that the course credit piece of it. The CDO doesn't assist with just the course credit side of things. However, everything else other than the course credit will be the same, whether it's an internship or externship. So you can find the postings either on CDO Online, the Simplicity platform, or in weekly newsletters that you receive from the CDO. And you would apply just the way you apply for any other position.
great. That's great. Now, there's something I want to tell all of you. In addition to these permanent internship slots, and there's only like 6 or 7 of them, we have many students that go off and get internships all over the place in some of the most incredible placements. So if you turn to page 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16 and 17 of the Case Global Magazine, you will see 105 places that our students have gotten internships. And what I'd really like you all to do is not just sit back and wait for these internships emails that Julie was talking about to come out and say, I'll just apply there, because everybody is going to apply to those and you're going to be competing with a bunch of classmates. I would like you to go onto the websites of these places and apply to those. And when you do, you can tell them that you're going to be getting funding from the law school. That helps because they like to know that you're a funded intern that they don't have to pay, because they hardly ever do. And then if you need recommendation letters, you can get your lead professor. If you've done work for me, I'm happy to do them. And you can get people from undergraduate as well. Those are really important. It's important to the law school and it's important to you that we don't only use this easy process to get the internships, but that we cast a wide net and try to get internships by sending out emails and going on websites as well. Yes.
And Professor Tarp, if I could just add one other item to that. So the CDO has actually been putting together a spreadsheet that's based on the list in the Case Global magazine, where we've been trying to identify as many application portals online as we possibly can, and also identify when the application deadlines are for these different organizations. So we will be issuing that spreadsheet within the next few weeks. So hopefully that's a tool that all of you can use to find and apply for these different positions.
That is going to be so incredibly useful. Thank you for doing that. All right, so the next question for the panel that I have is each of these internships have different times that they're announced. They take different amounts of time to get back to you, and they want different things. So let's just go down the list and tell us about the process of applying for the internship that you went through.
So I went through the Class D Foundation. I think I applied in February. I didn't find out until March, and I opted to do my internship in person. So I was moving to New York, up where I was going to live for the summer. And it was a very tight process, but you don't hear back for quite a bit of time, so you don't need to panic. That was something that I noted as a 1L. Everybody else was getting their offers, and I was still waiting. Fine. So it did take a bit of time, but it worked out in the end.
So that was not my experience. But I also did the Class C fellowship. So I don't know, maybe year by year, things are going differently. I applied in, I believe, November, and I had heard back before Christmas. So I want to say it was like within the month. So when we all came back in the spring, I already had my internship outlined, which was really nice to not have to stress about that. Although I know that that is not the case for most. But yeah, I had to write an interest essay as well as turn in my resume and things like that. And when you do it through the foundation, you're being selected by the school, not by Human Rights Watch. So just keep that in mind when you're writing your essay. It's to this university.
Yeah, and what we do is we give Bruce Klatsky, the head of the foundation, the list of our recommended people, and then he makes the final decisions.
For me, I would say, what was my process like? Last fall, I had heard of a few JAGs that were, or specifically branches that were looking for JAG interns. And I looked it up just to see out of curiosity because it was something that was on my radar of interest even years prior. And I had seen that the deadline I think was that day or something. And I was like, oh goodness. Or it was the day after. I was like, I really want to do this, but I had no idea the deadline was happening. But I scrambled to get things done. You ended up writing me a recommendation letter, which I appreciate. But I had an interview shortly after that. It was, I would say, within 2 weeks, but I didn't get the official job offer until, so that would have been September of last year. I got the job offer in December. Then how it works with the Navy and other JAG branches as well, because I ended up applying to the Army as well and got accepted there, but ultimately ended up choosing the Navy. You can rank your locations. And so that's what I did. And then I didn't find out on my placement, I don't think until the spring, maybe April or so. So it was a while, but it ended up working out well. And I will say, I just looked it up just to let you guys know, the Navy JAG, if you're interested in that internship, the deadline is tomorrow. So, if you want to do that, honestly, I recommend scrambling to get it in. A done application is better than no application.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm glad we had this session tonight. I do want to mention something about JAG. So probably none of us want to be out fighting for the United States in some foreign war, but other than the Marine JAG Corps, the JAGs are not on the battlefield. They're on a desk somewhere, usually completely safe. Sometimes, though, it's on an aircraft carrier. There is a JAG on an aircraft carrier. There are Judge Advocate General Corps for each of the branches of the military. So that's the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, but also the Coast Guard. And the head of the Coast Guard JAG is our alum, Rick Batson. The head of the Navy Reserve JAG a couple of years ago was our alum, Janet Donovan. So we have had amazing success. There are hundreds, well, maybe not that many. There are dozens of our alums that are currently in high positions in the JAG Corps. There's now also a JAG Corps for Space Command. That all sounds very exotic and excellent. So I do recommend, if you're interested in international law, to think outside the box and think about JAG. And you probably know, how many year commitment is it after law school if you do that?
It's 4 years active duty, and then I believe it's another 4 years in the reserves, but basically just four.
Okay,
Yep.
so that is the one part of the commitment you have. All right, next.
I think I applied I did apply in late March. I heard back in like 3 weeks. I sent in an interest essay and my resume.
Okay, and that's through the Canada U.S. Law Institute that our adjunct professor and director of the Cox Center, Steve Petrus, runs. And so, how many people did that with you this summer? It was just you or two? Two. So there's a couple get to do that. Okay, nice.
I think I applied in January and then I heard back in February. But then I wasn't placed within my specific division in Human Rights Watch until like a couple of months after that.
I think I applied December, January, I think, and then I later in a month, maybe in February, I heard back. But then you have to send them all the information they require, and you're not officially accepted until you pass the background check, which took like 1 month or something, and then I had to. They require more stuff, so like I fingerprint and all that. So just keep in mind that it might take a while, and then if you're stressful like me, for me it's not official until they say that, oh, I'm officially going, even if I don't have any criminal record or anything or whatever, I know that it's gonna come up clean. So officially due like in April, of March, and then I had to leave like mid-May, so it's pretty.
I think my process was 2 weeks from application to offer, and I submitted a resume, cover letter, and reference from HR. I will take a second though, like Dolores did, to just mention something about these. Is like when you do apply for these positions, do the legwork about like what your requirements are to enter the country that you're going to ahead of time. That's something that I didn't do because I was told by the Red Cross that they were going to handle immigration stuff for me, and ended up not getting started until June, which was like a couple weeks before I left. That's a chart that talked me down the morning of my flight because I was worried I wasn't going to be able to get into Switzerland to do my job. And I appreciate you for doing that. But take ownership of that. Like, don't trust that the IO will do things for you. Keep in mind that everyone's scrambling with resource challenges right now, and sometimes things fall through the cracks, especially with HR. So that's just something I would caution.
There's two lessons there. One is follow up. Don't assume just because you haven't heard anything that it's because you didn't get the position or they are conscientiously processing your papers. It may just have fallen through the cracks. So it doesn't hurt to follow up. That's number one. And number two, in this field, you've got to be really flexible. So when Obid called me up, he says, look, I don't have a visa. How can I just arrive there? And I'm like, just go. It'll work out. I promise you. So it did. It worked out just fine. And it almost always does. Julie, back to you. How do they apply for funding? Because they all were talking about how they got some funding from the Cox Center. How does that work?
Okay, yes. So the law school has several different sources of summer fellowship funding that mostly come from very generous alumni and donors. And the Cox Center, that includes funding that the Cox Center has available for international law positions. The CDO has a single process for all the different kinds of funding, and we will be opening up the application process. I apologize, I don't remember exactly when we opened it last year. It was probably around winter break, but you'll see that in our weekly newsletters. We'll be prominently advertising it, and there will be a form that you fill out to identify which kinds of funding you're applying for based on the type of summer position that you have, and all the application requirements will be spelled out. The funding is competitive. There's not necessarily enough funding for every student to get a summer fellowship, although historically the Cox Center has been able to fund pretty much every student doing an international law position. But you'll receive a lot more detailed information about it in the coming months.
One requirement is that you, as soon as you arrive at your placement, you send us a photo of you with some iconic building or a logo of the placement in the background, just like you see in the magazine. And then you will appear in next year's magazine. But that's real important to us. So that is a requirement. All right. Now, for those of you who went abroad, it's really expensive to live in a foreign country, and the funding is nice, but oh my gosh, is it expensive. So let me ask about Geneva and France and Honolulu, which isn't abroad, but it's far. How did you find your housing? How did you make it affordable? You want to start?
I did not. I was in the hole, but I would say it was a couple sources for me. Definitely the funding from the school was a big help. And my parents helped me out with some of it, and then working a job that I saved up for. So I would say three sources, and even then, that was still a little bit tight. But it was just very expensive in Hawaii. I will say though that if you are looking for a paid internship with a JAG branch, still the Army does pay, and so I had that opportunity. So can't complain too much that I got an unpaid internship when I chose that, and I mainly did that because of the experience. But if you want a paid JAG internship, there are opportunities to have that, especially with the Army. But with the Navy, they didn't pay, and it being in Hawaii, I was tough. I had to arrange the housing on my own. I ended up figuring out an Airbnb situation in downtown Honolulu, which you can imagine that was a lot of coin. Um, but just yeah, to be candid, it was a lot, but I ended up making it work and had a great time still. But yeah, just be aware, it's a lot.
So how'd you do it in France?
The housing is horrible. Like when you meet the other interns, it's not now it's fine, but you see that all the interns are constantly looking for housing or moving and all that. But because it's hard to find housing in here. But I just say be persistent. Like sometimes you're scared. For example, the Interpol for their interns, they don't help you find housing. They sometimes send you like a magazine or something that has recommendations or specific how to start and all that. But be persistent. I tried to find housing in different websites that I don't remember the name. Later you can reach out to me and I can hear. But I sometimes was like scared that they weren't like secure enough and I was getting scammed. A little paranoid about that. So I constantly like email Interpol. I was like, hey, I know you cannot help me, but don't you have like do you know about anyone on intern there or someone that knows about something apartment? And they did send me, they have something about advertise like in the like there. And they sent me an advertisement, like an ad about an intern that was looking for a roommate. So I contacted the guy and then he put me in contact with the landlord and that's how I got it. Another important aspect is that for France you need a guarantor. But I don't know how I did it, but from the very beginning, I told the landlord that I don't have a guarantor and most likely won't have one. But I was like, I would give the money and it's all good, right? So I was like, making it basically, and it ended up like working out, and so I got that one, but I was lucky and I took a risk, but I didn't know if I needed the contract like signed. I'm a person that wants to be like fully prepared, I just want to get things nowhere or whatever. So I didn't know if I needed like proof of the contract because that's what sometimes the like friends list of proof of contract that you could sustain yourself or something. So I signed the contract before I even saw the apartment and everything. And I arrived on the first day. I didn't get an Airbnb hotel. I arrived to the place with my suitcase, and then he showed me around, and it all worked out. I lived with two guys in Interpol. Honestly, the best option. I said, if you're like living with strangers, it's better to live with strangers that work at Interpol, a safe place, and supposed to be. And then versus strangers that live like that you don't even know or whatever. So, but yeah, regarding how expensive it was. It was pretty expensive. I had savings since undergrad, which I really had to dig in. And so yeah, so it was like a mix of the money we got from cut, but mostly you have to put a lot. And but the housing is pretty that way you don't constantly have to like by each transaction it doesn't like cover the exchange rate.
So I guess I'll complain, but then I also think that there's some suggestions that would be really helpful for people moving forward. When I came to Geneva, I found out on my first day that the money that I had received for my grant was half of what the poverty line is in Geneva. So I knew that I was going to have a hard time the whole time I was there. And we can talk about that another time. But that is sort of the reality of it, and you have to make do. And I was really lucky that I had a job before, but I think the implications on housing, right, especially for people who maybe took a few years gap before law school. I'm 29 years old. Most student housing cuts off at 27 or 28, which means I wasn't eligible for most student housing. I was able to find a place that didn't care what my age was, and we made that work, but that only lasted half the time. And then I had to get an Airbnb for the second half. So it was quite expensive to get housing nailed down. I do think that there's a couple of ways that you can, at least for Switzerland, because I don't know how this works in other parts of Europe, but that you can kind of deal with this. One is that I would recommend reaching out to the intern coordinator for your placement as soon as you get your offer and ask them if anyone needs a cat sitter for the time being. And I'm being dead serious. This is a thing in Geneva, and probably other parts of Europe too. People just like abandon their homes for parts of the summer. Like they'll go visit like Spain or France or London or America for like 2 months or a month, and they need someone to watch their cat, and they will literally give you free housing if you just watch their cat. I found out about that like way too late in the process, or else I would have asked about that from the get-go. But this is serious intel. If you're going abroad, like please just ask up front. You might get to cut your housing in half. So
That's great. So a lot of people out in the audience are thinking, maybe I don't have the right foreign language skills, or I don't have any foreign language skills to do some of these internships. So, you know, the one in France, the one in Geneva, I don't know in Hawaii if you know any local dialect. But did you, any of you find that you needed a foreign language, or that it was helpful to have a foreign language?
So Geneva is Switzerland is three languages, but Geneva is in the francophone part of Switzerland. So it's very helpful to speak French when you're like moving around and trying to do things every day. It doesn't matter at work because the IFRC base language for transacting is English. We did have interviews with Madagascar where we needed somebody to do French, and then we were kind of sitting on the call like hoping that we could do something. But you don't have to know another. I have a little Spanish, very little French, and Urdu, but I didn't need them for
Well, I'd say that for work, you don't really need it. I was able to use, I know Spanish, so I was able to use Spanish and English, which was really cool. I love using the languages I know in the word. French, I didn't really need it. It's basically interpol, the majority of the work is done in English, so official stuff. I use Spanish to like do research and talk and all that, but it was almost all English. Outside of work, I would say that knowing French would be pretty helpful. I sometimes had to um make do with my Duolingo knowledge or something because sometimes they didn't like I say like I know English or Spanish. And they'd be like, yeah, and just proceed to speak in French without having it. There's a TCO to get the transportation card. And want to well 18 to 25, I think has like a discount for students. But anyway, the thing is that they made me say talking in French, do all that procedure in French. But I think it's honestly like now that I see it's fun. You get to like immerse yourself in the language, not maybe now, but just maybe learn the basics and for the supermarket learn stuff like chicken and all that because it's really helpful when you're reading stuff and be like, okay, I want that.
All right, I see that we have 20 minutes left, and I want to get your questions and for our experts out here. So what's on your mind? What are you thinking about? Yes,
I'm interested in doing the
it's coming. The microphone's coming. Thanks for your patience. There you go.
I think some other people here too are interested in doing like the concurrent program, like your third year. And so I was wondering if any of you guys did that, or if it's not typical to like do an internship like overseas your first summer, second summer, if you want to do that.
So if they did it, they'd be there now. So
Oh yeah.
let me ask you guys though, do you know any students who first did an internship and then continued on in a foreign country for the concurrent degree program?
I used to be responsible for the study abroad programs. I'll just talk loud. I'm not anymore, so my information may not be entirely current. Oh, there's a microphone. There's multiple microphones.
So I don't know if this is current, but back in the day, yes, there are students who did summer internships or externships abroad. Maybe I mean, for the most part, they maybe came home and then went back abroad, but it is possible to do both. So that's the short answer is yes, you can do that.
And I can vouch that is still the case. So you want to go next?
I mean, can you hear me?
No, but we need the microphone for the recording.
So I was just wondering, like, we guys kind of spoke on it, but like, how is the workload? Like, how you know, Monday through Friday or whatever it may be. How is your day to day, essentially?
Who wants to volunteer to answer that?
I can answer that. So domestically, you work like a certain amount of hours. So I worked, I think like 8 weeks full time, but being in New York, a lot of it was you could not just fun. It was pretty manageable. It's just a regular job basically.
Sophia, how hard did they work you in the Navy?
I would say, you know, the notion of it being a government job, the hours are definitely way more set in stone and they're not gonna work you in terms of, you know, maybe how a firm traditionally would, but it definitely was a lot of rigorous work. I would say I was getting up around 6 or so every day and I was there from about, depending on if we had like a PT in the morning, which they did that sometimes, it was very fun. I liked it, but we would be there from around like 8 to 4 or so. And so that was Monday through Friday, and so I felt like it was very manageable. There was a few times when, you know, that I could count on my hand that I brought work home. They didn't require me to do that, but I wanted to, you know, kind of show up and go above and beyond to make sure that I was kind of putting my, you know, name in the ring for consideration for a job after. But I had a lot of time to go surfing and free diving, so
You
yeah,
surf?
I do, yeah.
Wow.
So Hawaii's a great location. I'm a little biased, but you definitely should apply. So.
So they're a silent interval to you as far as hours.
It was honestly super nice, and I think hours were from 9. Because honestly, it was nice. Sometimes you had to. One time I had like one or twice like a meeting right before I had to leave, so sometimes I had to. Or sometimes there's a conference you're interested in staying. Or, but the workload was fine. They were really like flexible, and I realized sometimes you get cases at the beginning of the week, and then I just get you to get it done fast, and then I actually ask for more work. Like if I finish, I keep asking for more work.
And that's a point I want to make. For summer interns in particular, if you don't think you're getting the level of exciting work or deep work, you can always ask. And if you feel like you have time for more work, they're not going to be unimpressed if you ask them for more work. They're going to think that's really cool. When you work at a law firm, you also have to be careful about managing your own work. And by that, I mean, sometimes people will have a whole bunch of different partners asking them to do projects, and you'll take on too much. And then you won't be able to do a good job. So you have to be honest with the partners that are assigning you to let them know what the other projects are that you're doing and what those due dates are. That doesn't make you sound lazy. That just makes you sound like you're on top of things. And they will know how, once they hear that from you, to make sure that they're not overburdening you. Abid, you're the last one in Geneva at the Red Cross. How much work?
Say like our alum Chris Rossi always says like public international law is not necessarily like a vacation, right? And I think because I was working on something time sensitive with this treaty that's coming out next year, or that's going to go for negotiations next year, the case studies were my internship, and they had written it so that the time frame that everything needed to get done was during my 7 week stint, which meant that I had some weeks where I was only working a 35-hour week, but I also had a few 50-hour weeks, right? Because you trying to do the thing. The other thing to keep in mind with international law is that sometimes, well, two things. One is that if you're working with people all around the world, sometimes you have to work on schedules all around the world. So I had 6 a.m. calls sometimes, 8 p.m. calls sometimes. I almost had a 10:30, but I was like on a road trip to Italy, so I had to like tell them that I couldn't be there for that call. But like it's all over the place, like time wise, but it doesn't happen all the time. You just have to like mentally plan for it. The other thing I would say is it's very like self-driven work. the people who are working in these organizations, part of the reason you don't tend to go right after graduation is because these people have like proven track record careers where they were really good at what they did before they ended up running whatever they're running in this large international organization. They don't have the time to hold your hand and like walk you to the deliverable that you need to submit. So a lot of this is you having to come in and say like, okay, what's the task? Ask the questions you need to ask, but you have to plan your work yourself because you're not getting the luxury of like regular check-in every couple of hours. So you have to kind of set time ahead of time. Like once a week, you're going to meet with people to ask for status updates. You have to report out on risks yourself. You have to raise your hand when there's a problem and you need more work. So there is a level of self-direction that's really important, especially as international law jobs, just because of the types of people you're working with. You're not going to be managed by an associate. You're going to be managed by someone who's like managing attorney, partner, caliber person, right? So that's just something that you should keep in mind.
Let me ask, for those of you who went to the office, what was the dress code like?
Professional.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have sword.
No.
So yeah,
figure out that you could.
it took me like a week, because my department also is on the same department as like a data analyst department. And it became clear like after a few days of wearing business casual that like nobody else was wearing business casual. So I just went back to my old software days and started wearing shorts and
For me, I saw that there were like people with dresses and sometimes with like business casual. I decided most of my suitcases were filled with business attire, so it was like this, but with like professional pants and just like professional. But I did wear Converse because the plans were.
So my advice to all of you for these internships and also for jobs, start out being dressy. Wait and see what the culture is. Make sure you're sure of the culture and you're not just emulating one, odd individual. And then you can go and dress down to whatever the culture is, like Abid was saying. All right, next questions back there. Yeah.
Hi, I had a quick question. So I'm very interested in Interpol, placement, and I was just curious about going more in depth about the application process. Did you at all do an interview, or was it based heavily on your application? So your cover letter, your resume.
I did apply to Presidio. You basically only have to send, I think, the resume and the cover letter. Besides that, I don't know how they select. I think it's just maybe they send the list and they choose one. I'm not sure.
Julie, how did they do that? How does Interpol choose from the people that have applied?
I don't actually know. Yeah,
I think we just sent them all the names
right,
and the
yeah,
applications.
yeah,
and they
we send them
check.
the applications and then they make the selection internally.
My friend, that after that, I got an email that saying basically, it's a weird email, like, I don't know, to arrange like a call. But but it wasn't like, it wasn't a formal interview, it was just the call. He was like, maybe like someone with me will like present myself, but it seems like they have already made up their mind that they wanted to choose me because they were, hey, introduce yourself, tell me a little bit, and then they were like, hey, you have been like selected, so let's see if you want it, like. So.
Did any of you have to do interviews? Well, sometimes that happens though. So
I actually didn't have an interview.
Did
I
not.
did it for the army, and then I thought it was fake. The email that I got, it was like, congratulations. I was like, no way, this is real, because I was used to always going through the interview process. And so even though I guess it's a rigorous process, they just skip over that. And so if you apply, don't be surprised if you don't get an interview scheduled, but I didn't. I'm sure about that.
all right. I will say this, when you're applying, make sure that your cover letter is really tailored to where you're applying. Really think about that. So don't use the same generic cover letter. They can sniff that out and they don't like it. And the second thing is, if you're going to do the interview, first talk to one of these people whose emails are here and ask them, what do I need to know for this interview so that I sound like I really know about this placement? That'll go a long way. Okay, more questions?
Thanks. So those
those of you that did the Human Rights Watch internships, so if you were you able to choose if you did it remotely or if you went in person, and if you did it remotely, did you still live there, like you in Washington DC, or?
Yeah, so it wasn't a choice. The organization wants remote interns. Like they do not want you in the office because their office is very small and shut down. So like if I went into the office every day in DC, it would have been me in an empty office with like 3 other people. Like that's a waste of my time. It's a waste of their resources to bring students out there. I don't know if that's different in New York. New York is their main headquarters. DC, they've got like a if you know what a WeWork is, it's essentially it's like a building where many different companies have their offices. So we had like a little corner. Um, but they did tell me that if I wanted to be there, that I could come visit, and so I did go twice. And I spent like half a week working in person in the office because it just happened that my boss was in person. But I think if I had been working with anyone else, that would not have been an option.
Okay, Lara, you were at Human
Yeah.
Rights Watch in New York. How did you get it so that you could be there?
So they offered both hybrid or remote, or hybrid remote or in person. I specifically said that I wanted to do in person. And so they found me a supervisor who was based out of New York. My team, the global health team, had people in London and whatnot, but my supervisor, Julia Bicker, since she was based in New York, she was like, that's works, you can come. New York is their main office, so I got to work in the Empire State Building, which was really cool. And my office had a window view of Upper Manhattan, which was very awesome. They have, when I was there, it was pretty empty at times, but they were working on bringing people in and kind of encouraging them to come back to like the office since they didn't want it empty. But I think that depending on the location, you can ask and then see if they can accommodate.
I'll just say I was told like the Human Rights Watch company policy is now transitioning to remote work. So so I'll just say like that is their intention, is to transition to remote. So
More questions? Yes.
So did each of you have previous international law, international relations experience? Or if not, how did you tailor your previous experiences to the position you wanted?
I can start. I had zero experience. My only experience was I was on the ICC moot court team. That was it. Previously, I had actually worked as a hospital medic, so I had done healthcare, which I think helped in my application for Human Rights Watch because I knew that they had a global health department, and so I kind of tailored my past experience. Like, hey, I worked in a hospital. I know what patient care looks like. I know what a sophisticated air quotes system could be. Like, I want to work in this area because I think I have to bring a unique twist by tailoring the past experiences to a specific department. You're more apt to kind of gain that department attention.
I'll add to that really quick too. I would say that I definitely have a little bit of experience as it relates to international law. You don't need it at all, although I think what they really look for is passion. I think things that stood out on my application was I had had time in Geneva before the Human Rights Council, getting to work with a nonprofit that I've been a part of for the past few years, and I think that stood out in my application. And then some study abroad experience, and even though like I didn't have to use, I speak French in addition, and I didn't have to use that this summer, but I think even just dealing with all the Navy deals with, I think they looked for those things. And so I think it helped my application, but I think as long as you express an interest and a willingness to be wherever and tailor that, what you were saying, like in your cover letter, I think you can totally get in anywhere. So.
Want to chime in on that one?
I have zero experience. But I think I kind of like that I was speaking of war crimes, even in the project. I highlight that I speak Spanish like native Spanish. This language, I feel like people that speak this language, I can communicate. That because you're working in international place, so I've mentioned that. And I think I was in forensic psychology, so
Other questions? Yeah.
What was the biggest difference between the expectations you had for your internship and the reality of actually doing the work?
Question?
I'll say for me, I didn't think it would be so technical. I was in meetings with aeronautical engineers, so I felt really dumb half the time. But it was a learning experience. I was.
Any of you who go into litigation, that's going to be your whole career. So, anybody else?
I think I wasn't expecting it to be so diplomatic, in the sense of like the number one feedback I kept getting on my writing work products was that you're not being diplomatic enough because I was writing like I was trying to do what they teach you in your first year of law school, which is like present the facts and make persuasive arguments, right? But there's so many audiences to persuade that's like a really important skill that you have to learn to build as you're continuing to do international legal writing. It's just like make sure that everybody's happy or at least neutral about what you're writing.
You know, that's a really important point in legal writing, and I don't know how much we actually teach that in law school, but you have to know your audience and you have to know what the culture is. When I clerked for a federal judge, the first thing he told me, which was really good advice, he said, Michael, he says, you've got to put it down where the goats can get it. And I was like, I have no idea what that means, Judge. He goes, you're writing up here with giraffes. You've got all these like long SAT words because the law has to be accessible. So write my judicial opinions so anybody can understand it. And if you're going to be, working on these things for press guidance, it's not written like a legal brief. It's a whole different kind of writing. If you're writing, diplomatic communications, that's different as well. You just have to learn the culture, and that's part of what makes it exciting to work abroad. Other questions?
Can I just add on to that last question real quick? I will say, like, to kind of tag on to that, I knew that I would be doing legal writing and research in my job, and the work product that I produce at the end of it is nothing like what I thought I would be producing in the beginning. And so much of that is because the reason that they wanted a law student in the position that I was doing was because they wanted someone who could translate the mumbo jumbo of the Clean Air Act. Because if you've ever read the Clean Air Act, it is extremely confusing. The guidelines are not clear. So they needed somebody who could go through and kind of understand, like in your like reg class, like go through that stuff and really simplify it and make it accessible to everyone. So I would say that is a crucial skill for all law students to learn, but it was definitely not something I thought I was going to learn going into the internship.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you all for doing this. I just wanted to know generally, and this is a question for CDO as well. What could we do, or what do you recommend we do right now at this point in the semester?
Question. Anybody?
Start writing your applications.
I would just say make an internal list, maybe a Google Doc or a Word doc, and just say, okay, like here are the things that are on my radar that I'm at least interested in, and then put the deadlines there. And I think, what like Dean Roby said as well about how they have great resources, keep track of that, but even make something internal for you to just say like, okay, here are all the things, because I was fortunate enough to get the internship that I had, but I almost missed the deadline. And so I wouldn't want that to happen to you if you really, had something that was on your radar. So I would just like maybe this week jot something down and add to it over time and say, okay, this is what I need to start collecting and building those mental notes. That's what I would do.
I think like two things. One is that like go to the CDO events in the later part of the fall where they start talking about planning your application process, because there's some really helpful suggestions people always give about like how you create a tracker to keep track of people you email and jobs you apply for. Super, super important. The other thing I would say, regardless of whether or not you're doing international law, if you're not intending to be in Cleveland this summer, start saving money for your expenses now. I cannot understate enough how important it is, because I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have the savings buffer.
Julie, I'm going to give you the last word on that. What should they be doing now?
So I actually agree with the advice that all the students were giving. Especially to start researching places that you might be interested in working, figuring out when the deadlines might be. If you can't figure out when the deadlines might be, our office is happy to help you with that. And then going back to the point about having a really custom tailored cover letter, that's super important for any job, but especially for these international law jobs that are so specialized, and they're not necessarily a traditional law practice job. It's really important to know what work the organization does and even what some of the terminology is that they use to describe the work so that your cover letter can sound well informed and like you'll be a good fit for the job.
I'll give you one last tip, and that is in the next 3 days is the American Society of International Law's mid-year meeting right here at Case Western, and we're bringing about 300 people that are at the top of the field that will be here at the law school. Start networking. Just introduce yourself, tell them that you're excited about international law, ask them what they do, and who knows where that conversation will take you. That's it for today. Big round of applause for our internship experts. Thank you.